The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
You know what makes every outfit look better? The right bra from Third Love. Their bras make it easy to ultimate cleavage, a smooth look, or even stop your shirt buttons from pulling. They make over 60 sizes, including half cups you won't find anywhere else, so you'll find your perfect fit. Third Love solves bra problems, or what they call broblems. Real women test every style they make. Comfort and support are guaranteed. So stop settling for bad bras. You deserve better. Get your problem solved today. Save $15 on your first order with code PODCAST15 at thirdlove.com.
Hi, everyone. This is Jillian with Court Junkie. Court Junkie is a true crime podcast that covers court cases and criminal trials using audio clips and interviews with people close to the cases. Court Junkie is available on Apple Podcasts and podcastone.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 307 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing very well.
Good.
You know, today is a little strange for us. We are taping early in the morning.
We are.
Which is something we hardly ever do. We always tape at night, but I feel good.
You should feel good. You've drank a lot of coffee.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's got me all jacked up, which is, I might have a Mountain Dew too. We don't know.
I think you're good on caffeine.
Let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Hope Vanderstelt.
Hey, Hope.
Tom.
What's going on, Tom?
Jeff Boyle.
Hey, Boyle.
Christina.
Hey, there's Christina.
Ashley Erwiller.
What's going on, Erwiller?
Donna Davis.
Well, appreciate that, Donna.
Robin Gregory.
Hey, Robin.
Arizona Carly.
What's going on, Carly?
Stevie Facenda.
Facenda.
Charles Davis.
What's up, Davis?
Melanie Wetzel.
Appreciate that, Melanie.
Earl.
Oh, man, there's Earl.
MT.
What's up, MT?
Jocelyn Swenson.
Appreciate that, Swenson.
Chelsea Sharp.
Hey, Sharp.
Rachel Moraes.
What's going on, Moraes?
Robert Nolan.
Hey, appreciate that, Robert.
Rachel Behringer jumped out to our highest level.
Look at you, Rachel.
Brandy Smichowski jumped out to our highest level.
I just like saying Schmiskowski.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like you saying it too. We had Timothy McKinney.
Hey, Timothy.
And last but not least, Elizabeth Saylaw.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Tim Haywood.
What's up, Haywood?
So we appreciate the new Patreon support, the continued support. We had some great PayPal donations from David McMullen.
Hey, David.
And Laura Krieger.
Thank you, Laura.
So thanks to everyone. Gibbs, right now on True Crime All the Time, we have an episode out on the Blue-Eyed Six. And, you know, this one's a little different for us. We're going back to the late 1800s to talk about a story involving a group of men who killed another man for insurance money.
You know, it's back in the late 1800s, but it could play today just as easy.
It could, except for the fact that, you know, this man wasn't family. It was like all these guys conspired to take out insurance policies on him and then kill him. So could it, that part, I don't know how that would play out today, but the greed for insurance money definitely plays out. We see that all the time. All right, buddy, are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I'm ready.
We are headed to Canada to talk about Tammy Leakey. In 1981, Tammy Leakey lived in an apartment at 339 Fifth Avenue in Verdun, a borough of the city of Montreal, Quebec. Her parents were divorced, and she lived with her mother, Betty O'Connor Leakey. Betty and her daughters had moved into a ground floor flat on Fifth Avenue in Verdun after the divorce, 2 months after moving into her own place. Betty went to see an old friend and to catch up on all the latest gossip. Betty, with her 2 daughters, 12-year-old Tammy and 8-year-old Donna, set off for an evening at the home of Betty's friend, Bonnie Tapp, and her daughter, Cindy.
So it's time to catch up.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're very early on, but we're setting the scene.
Yeah.
Right? There's a divorce. Betty has custody of 2 fairly young daughters, and she's setting herself up in a new place, but she wants to go visit an old friend to catch up on gossip. And you could see that. I mean, divorces are traumatic.
Well, of course.
On everybody involved, moving, setting up in a new environment, all of that is very tough. So it would be natural to kind of want to ground yourself with a good friend and have a night like that where, everything seems normal and this is what we used to do. So let's do this.
Yeah. And allow her daughters to get together with Bonnie's daughter, and maybe they can start building some type of bond as well.
So Bonnie Tapp offered to make coffee for her guests, but recalled that she was out of milk. So she asked Tammy if she would mind running out for some milk at the nearest grocery store, the grocery store Depenier chez Bert. And I have no idea if I'm pronouncing this correctly or not.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a little French here. That's not my strong suit. But
we
I know. But this grocery store was a little more than a block from Bonnie's house at the corner of Coleraine and Liverpool Streets. Tammy, described as a tall, quiet girl with brunette hair and steel-framed glasses, happily agreed with this request. She excitedly got ready. And then Bonnie mentioned that Tammy should get some chocolate bars for herself and the 2 other children. So Tammy set off to the corner store, excited to buy some candy and also help her mother and friend.
Yeah, I think, a 12-year-old's like, yeah, I'll go to the store without any parent, by myself.
It's an adventure.
Yeah.
You get a little taste of freedom.
And on top of it, I was told to go ahead and get some candy bars.
And that's going to be very exciting.
Yeah.
Who doesn't like candy, especially when you're 12 years old? Now, we are talking about 1981. And so we have to keep that in mind. Do people let their 12-year-olds go down the street today? Yeah, I'm sure some do.
Of course, yeah.
Me personally, I would probably not. But that's just personal parenting preference.
It's probably, more of a circumstance. Sometimes the circumstance, you have to allow your child maybe to go get you something.
Maybe.
Also it depends what neighborhood you live in, how you were raised, and
a lot of factors.
Yeah, many factors.
But I will say in 1981, I think more parents would have done that.
Oh, for sure. Because I know as a child myself, when I was 12 years old, it's probably been in the 70s, late 70s. I was 12 years old, maybe. I was wandering all over the place by myself.
Yeah. I don't know if that was by design, hoping that someone would
maybe
pick you up, or no, no, it was just a different time.
Yeah.
And we've talked about it before. I had so much more freedom as a 10, 12, 14-year-old kid than I ever gave, my girls, that it's, you can't even compare.
No, like you said, we talked about it many times. You'd wake up in the morning, jump on your bike, and disappear until the sun was coming down and you came back home.
Yeah, my parents didn't know where I was all day because they were at work.
I don't think they cared.
They were like, we're not paying for a babysitter, so, take care of yourself, find something to eat.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Not that they were bad parents. It's just what people did back then.
It was
a lot of
the environment was.
So Tammy headed off to this corner store. It was later in the evening, around 8:45 when she left, but the corner store was just a couple of minutes away from Bonnie's house. Nearly 35 minutes from the time when Tammy left, her mother became upset and on edge because her daughter had not returned from the store.
As I think a lot of parents would be, right? I mean, you notice that it's been a half an hour or more.
Well, and you're also doing the calculation in your head, right? It's a 2 or 3 minute walk.
Right.
It should take you maybe 5-10 minutes to get what you need. Another 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes back. Okay, let's clock it at 20 minutes.
Right.
Total. Well, when that 20-minute mark passes, then you start to think about it. When 30 hits, 35 hits, I could see where a parent would become worried.
Where is she? She should have been back by now.
It was raining that Thursday night. And a lot of papers talked about, the fact that Bonnie knew this store and thought at this time of night, it shouldn't be busy. It shouldn't have taken Tammy this long to get back. Betty became very worried. So Bonnie offered to walk down to the corner store by herself to bring Tammy home while Betty stayed with the other children. Upon arriving at the store, the owner said that Tammy was in the store, but stayed only long enough to make her purchases. He said that Tammy had left the store about 15 minutes earlier. Okay, so Betty doesn't know this information yet, but Bonnie does. She's got to be worried.
Oh, I'm sure she's panicking.
Because leaving 15 minutes before she got there would have meant that Tammy should have been back to her house.
Yeah.
As close as it was.
And on Bonnie's way to the store, you would think she would have passed her.
Right. She would have seen Tammy. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Bonnie attempted to retrace Tammy's movement. 4 doors away from her home, Bonnie found a brown paper bag just off the curb. The bag contained chocolate milk and chocolate bars, and it was lying in the gutter. She also found a pair of steel frame glasses. Now the worry has to increase exponentially because these were the glasses that Tammy was wearing when she left.
And the items that she was sent to go get from the store.
Yeah. So, what are you thinking? That these are now just laying there on the curb by the gutter. So Bonnie quickly returned home to get Tammy's mother, Betty. The two decided to start asking people on the street if they had seen a little girl. No one had. So the mothers then started knocking on neighbors' doors. After about 10 minutes, they knocked on the door of a ground floor apartment at 2340 Ride. Eva Renault eventually answered the door. Eva suffered from diabetes and had difficulty moving around. Because of that, she often had her chair propped up next to the window for a view while she watched television. However, on this night, Eva had been on her couch, about 5 feet away from the window, watching TV. She told Bonnie and Betty what she had seen. Eva said that a man in a beige trench coat got out of a small red car and forced a young girl into it. The girl screamed and yelled the entire time, but Eva wasn't able to do anything because she had trouble getting around.
But to tell that story to most likely that little girl's mom sitting there next to you had to be devastating.
Well, I think if you're Betty and Bonnie and you're hearing this story and you're putting it together with, the chocolate milk and the chocolate bars and the eyeglasses, yeah, that would be devastating because how could you not make the connection that this little girl that this woman saw being forced into a car was Tammy Leakey? So Betty and Bonnie hurried back to Bonnie's home to call the police. The story that Eva described in their minds, like we said, had to have been Tammy. So you had what was essentially a simple run to the grocery store that is now turned into a nightmare. Tammy was only 12 years old, a 7th grader in school. At that point, there was very little to nothing that Betty could do. Betty had heard a description of her daughter being kidnapped. Her only hope was that police could quickly find this red car or this man wearing the beige trench coat. Now, you talk about a helpless feeling, and you and I talk about a lot of them in these unsolved cases.
Yeah.
Here's one where you find out very quickly that a woman actually saw a man forcing a young girl into a car. You're putting it together that it's your daughter. I mean, this is a little different from, not knowing where a person is and you're worried about them. This is a different level of worry because now you think she's been kidnapped from a verifiable sighting. So maybe a little different than some of the other cases we talk about.
Oh, yeah. Instead of wondering, I think you actually know.
Or believe. Strongly believe.
Yeah. And I think either way you have concerns. I think this is just a greater concern.
Just a different level or a different type, I think. Shortly after the police were called, a patrol car arrived at the house. The police took the report and information given by Bonnie and Betty. The police then sent out an alert for Tammy Leakey. Her features, her clothing, and where she was last seen were factors described in the missing report. But all Betty could really do was wait for a response.
And we mentioned that before, how that's got to be tough.
Yeah, because I think as a parent, you want to solve something. You want to do something. You want to find your child. But what are you going to do as a mother if someone really has abducted your child and forced them into a car? Short of just driving around looking for small red cars, I really don't know what you could do. And sometimes the best thing to do is wait in the location where the person disappeared from, which may be very tough. Maybe that person comes back, maybe they call, and you kind of want to be there for that.
Yeah, but you hate to be idle.
You do. So it's kind of a very tough situation to be in, but you have the police out looking. So
you get to say, let the experts do their...
Yeah, I guess that's where I'm getting at. What is she going to do that the police are not going to be able to do?
Right.
She's not Liam Neeson.
No, she is not.
She's not going to be able to, track her daughter with some sort of specific set of skills and, defeat the bad guys. I mean, real life doesn't really always work like that, or very rarely works like that.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
About an hour after the report was filed, something came up. News about Tammy had potentially been discovered. G. Ewing Tate, a 73-year-old man, was driving along Lindsay Street in Dorval's Industrial Park. While driving, he noticed something in the field alongside the road. From a distance, it looked like a colorful pile of rags to him, but he still decided to stop to check it out. Walking towards this unknown pile, he soon discovered it was not rags, but instead jeans and a jacket worn by a young girl. The clothes had been torn, and the young child was lying on her stomach with her arms outstretched, and she wasn't moving. She appeared to be unconscious. The girl's body was warm, but she had no pulse. Tate then called the police. And this is a point in many unsolved stories that is compelling to me.
Yeah.
You have an individual not connected with the case at all, presumably, and they see something in the distance. A lot of people might just keep on going, not give it a second thought. This person thinks, I want to see what that is. Maybe it's curiosity. Who knows? At first, they think it's just a pile of rags. But then they discover that, it's the body of a young girl.
Yeah.
And, I'll never stop thinking about it as we do these cases. How traumatic is that? Because we've got trauma on the part of the family from, let's say a loved one being missing, found murdered. There's always trauma there. But there definitely has to be some kind of intense trauma from these individuals who find someone.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's got to be rough. I think probably more so with the child.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And depending how that victim looks when you find them could even be more troublesome.
So police get this phone call from Tate, and pretty quickly, an ambulance arrived at the scene. The ambulance took the child to Lachine General Hospital. Upon arrival, the emergency ward doctor declared the young child dead. So the case was then handed over to Sergeant Detectives Maurice Chartrand and Roland Wimet of the Montreal Urban Community Homicide Squad. The detectives were told about the Point St. Charles kidnapping. So they had the description of a missing child, and the detectives compared that description with the description of this girl who had been, brought into the hospital and pronounced dead. The descriptions matched. So they believed it was Tammy Leakey, and they reached out and notified her mother.
So her mom already living a horrific experience, right?
Yeah, nightmare.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Now it's the worst possible outcome.
Yeah, and all of this happened fairly quickly, right? A lot of the cases that we do, people are missing for long periods of time, and then, the family finds out maybe months, years later. That's not the case here. Betty finds out very quickly that her daughter has been killed. So in that short span of time, going from the concern, the worry of, where she at, to finding out that maybe she's been abducted, to then finding out that she was found dead. Just absolutely heartbreaking. Your heart breaks for her mother, her sister. They have to find this out. They have to deal with all of that.
Right. Just seems like so much emotional distress on somebody.
Oh, I can't imagine it. Thrive Market is my go-to for all of my grocery and household essentials, and the convenience of getting it all quickly shipped to my doorstep is a huge time saver. They have a lot of great brands at Thrive Market and a lot of great products. One of my favorites is their own brand of organic dry roasted macadamia nuts. They are outstanding. And as a Thrive Market member, I can save money on every single order. On average, I save over 30% each time. That adds up very, very quickly. Not only does Thrive Market save me money, but they also save me time. I love the filters they have on the website or their app. They have over 70 different ones. I use the one that helps me find great keto snacks. When you join Thrive Market, you're also helping a family in need. With their 1-for-1 membership matching program, you join, they give. Join Thrive Market today and get 30% off your first order, plus a free $60 gift. Go to thrivemarket.com/TCAT for 30% off your first order, plus a free $60 gift. That's THRIVE market.com/TCATT. thrivemarket.com/TCAT.
It's time to turn your daydream into your dream job. Wix gives you the power to turn your passion into a moneymaker with a website that fits your unique vision and drives you towards your goals. Let your ideas flow with AI tools that guide you, but give you full control and flexibility. Manage your business from one dashboard and keep it growing with built-in marketing features. Get everything you need to turn your part-time passion into a full-time business. Go to Wix.com.
Around 2 a.m. the next morning, relatives heard of the news and also had to contact 30-year-old Gordon Leakey at his Toronto home to tell him that his oldest daughter had been slain. Betty Leakey returned to her Verdun home and left her younger daughter, Donna, sleeping at Bonnie's home. Bonnie was devastated and was left wondering how to break the news to Tammy's sister. Now, I'll tell you right now, this woman, Bonnie, is in a very tough position.
She is.
I understand she's a very good friend. I also understand why Betty might want to leave Donna there with Bonnie. She's obviously dealing with a lot.
Sure.
And she probably has things to do. She has to go down to the police station, things like that. But you feel for Bonnie that she's got to be the one to break this very sad news to this young girl.
And how do you do that?
I don't know, as delicately as possible, but it's just, it's one of these things that people have to muster up the fortitude to do. And they do time and time again. We hear of these stories that people do things that seem unimaginable to many of us to have to do, but they do it. Around 9 a.m., Bonnie Tapp told reporters what happened. According to the Gazette newspaper, Bonnie said, "We told her last night that Tammy was missing. When Donna woke up this morning, she asked if Tammy came back, but we didn't answer her. We didn't know how to." And like we just talked about, I mean, this would be tough to do. And it would be tough, I think, on the part of Donna to hear this from, anyone but her parents. It's going to be tough no matter what, but.
Yeah, I mean, Tammy was 4 years older than Donna. I'm sure she idolized Tammy.
Obviously, a very tough day for an 8-year-old. The Gazette newspaper also provided the events that occurred after the death of Tammy Leakey. An autopsy on Tammy's body was done. The autopsy revealed no signs of sexual assault despite the ripped clothing. Results indicated that she was most likely strangled with a length of rope or electrical wire and also stabbed once.
What do you make out of the fact that she was killed but not sexually assaulted?
Yeah, I don't know. I think you could take a couple of different, avenues with that. Is this a person who just wants to kill or just wanted to kill?
Yeah.
That was their main goal. That's what drove them. Or, were they scared off? Did they not have enough time to maybe do some other things that they wanted to do, as sick as it is to think about those types of things? I don't know that we know that answer. I think you can speculate and talk about a couple of different theories. Also, I had the question of, is this a person that was targeting a young female or just looking for anyone vulnerable
At that moment
that they could get in their car, whether it was a child, an adult, a male, a female? We don't know. I think you have killers of opportunity,
of course,
who are constantly on the lookout for someone that they believe is vulnerable, that they can take advantage of and ultimately kill. And we know there are people who kill who do not commit sexual assaults. And for some of them, they actually get sexual gratification from the murders alone.
That's very true. Yeah, that's all it takes.
The director of Police Station 24, Robert Cote, said men in the area would be working alongside the homicide investigators in order to find Tammy's killer. He also mentioned that the people would have to be patient as the police were carefully and perhaps slowly tracking down all possible leads given. And I do think it's important to say things like that, because if there's one thing that people have a tough time with, it's being patient, especially when you're talking about a 12-year-old girl being murdered. Man, they want that person caught yesterday.
They do. Bring me the head of that guy.
Right. And so, patience is not something that is in, large supply when it comes to child killers, especially. One interesting piece added from Cote was that he denied radio reports that the killing was one of a long series of kidnapping murders in the neighborhood. The Gazette newspaper also headlined 50 other murders that were committed that same year, which also remained unsolved. The headline read, "The 12-year-old Verdun girl was one of 85 homicides in the Montreal urban community this year, and one of 51 cases still not solved."
That's a pretty healthy number.
It is. It is. Now, we are talking about a big city, right? Montreal is a big city.
It is.
So if we were talking about Chicago, what would the number be?
I'm sure it would be even higher.
Yeah, it probably would. But you have to think about it in the context of where people live, right? So the people of Montreal are reading this and thinking, okay, 85 homicides, 51 cases still unsolved. What's going on here? And this mention of, a series of kidnap murders in the neighborhood. Is this a serial killer?
I would be concerned if I was a citizen.
No, I would be too. The Gazette also said her killer may well be reading this story. Gazette police reporter Peggy Curran did a story. It was basically an hour by hour, day by day account of the events of Tammy's disappearance and her death. In it, she talked about how police handled Tammy's killing, how the neighborhood changed, and how Tammy's still grieving relatives were fighting to cope with her senseless and tragic death. But I want to go back to, the statement by Robert Cote for a minute. I said that it's important to kind of stress that people have to be patient, even though it's very hard for most people to do. He said the police were carefully tracking down all possible leads. Okay. Sounds very reasonable. But he also used the word slowly. And I did find that a little odd because you think of the word careful. It's reasonable. It's good to be careful.
Sure it is.
But to be slow is not normally seen as a good thing. Now, slow and careful can go together because to be careful, you kind of have to take it slow sometimes.
Right.
I just thought it was a very odd word choice.
Yeah, maybe not the best choice of words.
Yes, that's kind of what I thought. Nearly 2 months after the tragedy of Tammy Leakey's death, the Gazette on April 9th, 1981, led a section of their paper with the title, Point Parents Slam Police, Promise Vigilante Patrols. They had a bold header of, they don't care about us. Parents in Point St. Charles bitterly criticized the Montreal Urban Community Police Force for a lack of interest in the community's rising crime rate. They used their anger and discontent with the work of the police to form their own groups that would patrol the streets at night. And we talked about it, right? There was a prior newspaper article that stated that there were over 50 cases unsolved in just that community alone. I think that type of stat would raise the alarm with people.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it'd be hard to sleep at night in a community that people are being murdered and continuing to be murdered in your own neighborhood, and you don't feel like the police are really doing anything to solve these cases and to stop other ones from occurring.
Well, and I think that's what you have to take away from this, right? There was definite criticism of the police in this case to the point where, they use the word vigilante patrols.
Yeah.
I'm picturing throngs of people out at night with their flashlights or whatever they have, kind of patrolling the neighborhood.
I mean, you get to a point, I would think, that you're saying, I don't feel comfortable with what my local police are doing to protect my neighborhood, so I'm going to go do it myself.
The article stated that the parents met at the Point's YMCA to draw up and form a list of suggestions that they could take to police. And, part of that goes back to Cote using the word slow, right? People hear that, and what do they think?
No sense of urgency.
Yeah, there's no sense of urgency on the part of police. Whether it's true or not, it could come across that way just from the words that he chose to use. And it could make these people, and it sounds like it did, feel as though they needed to do something on their own, right? Kind of form their own thing to feel protected. So this list of suggestions accompanied a petition of more than 4,000 names calling for some type of police foot patrol in the area. Pearl Leakey, Tammy Leakey's grandmother, said, it's not fair for the kids. They can't grow up like robots, afraid to walk down the street or talk to a stranger. Now, this article obviously was back from 1981.
And she's right. Kids shouldn't feel that way. Kids should be able to go outside their front door or their back door and play like I used to, like you used to.
Nah, yeah, but the part of the quote that sticks out to me is shouldn't be afraid to talk to a stranger. Now, even you and I were taught as kids, right? Don't talk to strangers. That was like a big rule.
Sure, stranger danger.
Stranger danger, don't talk to strangers. So I thought that was a little odd. And maybe, Gibbs, we're thinking too much about our own experiences here in the U.S. I don't know what Montreal was like in 1981. Maybe there wasn't as much stranger danger. I really don't know.
That's true. Maybe it was more relaxed.
We know that it didn't seem as though they had any qualms sending Tammy down to the store at 12 years old. But I think in 1981, that could have happened here very easily.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. I mean, you and I grew up more in a suburban type of area.
Yes.
Where this is more urban. And I think, when you live in a city like that where the stores are on the corners and, you send your kid out to go a block down the street to the local grocery store or deli or whatever. I think that happened a lot back in that time frame, and I think if we lived in a city like that,
we probably would have done that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would ride. We talked about riding our bikes all over the place, but for me to go to the grocery store, that was not a block away.
No, that would have been an adventure.
And it would have been down a very busy, state route.
Yeah.
That I wouldn't have tried to traverse, or my parents would not have wanted me to be walking along or riding my bike down that. So yeah, we are talking about some differences, but I think it's important to discuss them, to highlight them as you go through some of these cases. So going back to this group meeting in 1981, the main suggestions at the time to improve safety were made by residents to open a police station in the Point, possibly. They talked about the fact that they wanted street lighting added and improvements in all the parks and residential areas, and also a 10 p.m. curfew to be established for children under 16 years of age.
Hey, that's great ideals. All those.
Yeah, no problem. Now, can they all be done? I don't know. Not easy to open a police station.
No, I think that would probably be the tougher piece of that. I think, to add some more street light, they could do that.
Yeah, it still involves money.
It does. I think the curfew is an easier thing to do, but also you might get some pushback.
You might get some pushback from people who say, no, we don't want that. Peggy Curran of the Gazette wrote about how Tammy Leakey's parents were overwhelmed by tributes for their daughter, Tammy, as the Leakey family slowly came to grips with the 12-year-old girl's violent and tragic death. They offered thanks to relatives, neighbors, friends, classmates, and even strangers who helped them through this ordeal. And, that's something that we don't probably talk about enough. We do talk about how the communities come together when searching for people. That happens a lot in the unsolved cases. But think about all of the people aside from family, because you're going to have family there to try to help you through this, but neighbors, friends, classmates, we said even strangers.
Yeah.
They donate money, oftentimes bring over food or, whatever it is. People are very compassionate in the wake of, a tragedy like this. And a family needs that because, who's going to make dinner? Who's going to, be able to do some of these things when you're dealing with like this soul crushing grief?
Yeah, I think it's hard to mourn for any loss, but especially a loss of a child, but even more so the loss of a child under these type of circumstances.
Yeah, it makes it very difficult. I've heard of people, donating DoorDash certificates or Grubhub certificates, and that's amazing.
Sure it is.
Because people still need to eat no matter what they're going through, but they're not going to feel like whipping up a meal. It's just not something that they're probably going to be able to deal with that easily.
Being a prime example is when my mom passed.
Mm-hmm.
The office I worked at sent me a gift money to DoorDash.
Yeah.
And it came in handy.
Sure.
So,
yeah, no, I definitely get it. Tammy's father, Gordon, said that people must work to protect their children in what he called a crazy world where children are not safe 100 feet from their front door. He also said, I beg and plead with anyone who has children to watch them and love them all they can. I'm 30 and I'd rather it had been me.
I think any parent would want it to be them and not their child.
Oh, I mean, you hear that all the time. Parents would give up their life if they had to protect their children. It kind of comes with the territory of being a parent.
But what he said, that the fact that the world is so crazy now that your child can't even be safe 100 feet from your own door, he's right. It's a shame. It's a shame you have to even worry about your child walking around your neighborhood. It's just so sad.
Yeah, it is. But here again, we're talking about 1981. I think it's even worse today.
Yeah, for sure.
In the world we live in. I'm not trying to paint, society today as completely evil, but maybe it's just the fact that we know more.
Yeah.
Than what we knew in 1981. Less naive, maybe.
Maybe.
Pearl Leakey, Tammy's grandmother, led the charge of support to form a system of protection for children in the community. She added, our world is bad, and I don't think it's getting any better. She was right about that. We have to fix things so that children need not be frightened of every person they don't know. At that time, the parents of the Point took actions into their own hands by forming a parent-led safety patrol in the community. Terry Natero, an organizer with the Point's community clinic, said to the paper, we'll do it until the police decide to do their job in the Point. We're fed up with the lack of service we get in this community. Robert Cote mentioned the last case of this kind occurred more than 5 years before. At that time, 16-year-old Sharon Pryor had gone missing for 4 days before her body was discovered. Her killer was also never caught.
Well, you know what? People remember the most recent, and they're remembering Tammy at that moment. And that's why they want the police down there to protect their neighborhood.
But I think the murder of Sharon Pryor is also concerning because, Tammy would not be the first time that a child in the Point had gone missing and turned up dead.
Good point.
Cote stated that the series of kidnap murders were not related. He even went as far as to say that children in the Point often leave their homes without parental permission and that cases like Tammy's are very rare. And he may be absolutely right in using the word rare. But again, like using the word slow, I don't think it goes over well with the public or went over well with the public.
No.
They're screaming about not being happy with the police and forming their own, patrols and things like that. They probably weren't buying that line of reasoning.
Yeah. I mean, rare just sounds like, well, it was only one or it was only two, one or two people, kids. Don't say rare.
No, well, when we know one is too many, right?
Yeah, exactly.
One it causes outrage. So to say it's rare, okay, technically you might be correct. But I would also say maybe you need somebody to help you pick your words.
Yeah,
a little more carefully.
I mean, this is why a lot of police forces have PR people on them, that prep statements.
Yeah, let's go over this statement before we just throw it out there. Cote went on to say that every effort is being made to solve this case, and the officers are working with a special determination that always evolves when a child is harmed. Now, I get what Cote is saying here, right? We're making every effort to solve this case. And for the most part, I think that's true for police all over the place. They want to solve cases. It's not like they're just sitting around eating donuts saying, I don't care if that case gets solved. They want to solve cases. And I do think that a lot of times there is a special determination that comes about when a child is harmed. I think you said it earlier, there is something that wells up inside people in regards to murder,
Right.
but something different when it involves the murder of a child. I don't know how else to say it. Children are viewed as precious, vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reasoning behind it.
I think the key word there is the vulnerability of a child.
One piece of information that stuck out from the case had to do with the witnesses. Eva Renault told the police about the red car, but said that she did not see as much as some reports had suggested she did. Like we mentioned earlier, Eva was the person that saw Tammy Leakey moments before she was kidnapped. She said in reports, "I didn't see very much, but people are treating me as though I watched it all happen and didn't do anything. Maybe I feel a little guilty. I go over it in my mind and wonder if there was more I could have done, but I really didn't know what was happening. I was sitting on the couch and saw a man's arm in a beige coat and a smaller arm like that of a girl in a blue coat. The man's arm pulled at the girl's, but I didn't see much more than that, and I couldn't move quickly enough to get a good look. I saw a small red car parked outside, and I heard someone yell. But until Tammy's mother and friend came around, I didn't think it was anything serious."
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the original report, of her telling Betty and Bonnie that she saw a man in a trench coat grab a girl, and she was screaming, and she was shoved into his car. I mean, that's different than what she's saying now. And you could make a case for someone saying, I saw a guy, grab this girl and they got in the car and they left. Well, maybe it was his daughter.
Yeah.
She wasn't home when she's supposed to be, and he came and got her.
We've all had a child who maybe threw a fit,
Sure.
didn't want to do what you were asking them to do. Now, could you see a scenario where, for whatever reason, a child doesn't want to get in the car,
Yeah.
but it's time to go?
Oh, absolutely.
So, you grab them by the hand, maybe in this case, the arm. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but does it happen all over the world? I guarantee it does.
Yeah, there's probably been a few times in my time that someone could have thought,
You were being a little,
is he taking these guys?
yeah, right. No, I'm just trying to get my kids in the car
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
Yeah, I've tried to reason with them for 10 minutes now. Now I'm just going to put them in the car because I got to go.
But I really do kind of get this feeling from, the reports in the newspapers of what Eva said, that she probably got a little flack. Like people were coming down on her.
Yeah.
Almost like, why didn't you stop this? And she's saying, I didn't even really understand what I was seeing.
Yeah.
And I think you have that in a lot of scenarios. You're seeing something, but do you know what it is? And do you know that it's as dire of a situation as it ultimately turns out to be?
In a lot of cases, probably not until you're fed more information later.
Yes.
Then you go, oh, now it adds up.
Right. And so do you act in that moment and maybe you don't because you don't really know what's going on?
I mean, on the flip side, if you do know what's going on, if it's obvious what's happening and you didn't say anything, yeah, you're going to have some type of level of guilt, I would think, later when you find out that the girl died.
Yeah, well, you're going to have guilt whether you did anything wrong or not. I just think that comes with the territory. We mentioned it. Eva had diabetes, which made it difficult for her to move around easily. And she even said it. This was partly why maybe she didn't see as much of what happened. This information and her testimony were actually confirmed the following weekend when a young woman called the police saying that she had been approached by a man in a small red car the week before, but had been able to get away. This news came to light only after what happened to Tammy. This situation with the woman walking along a secluded Point St. Charles Street had occurred 2 days before the death of Tammy Leakey. The woman didn't call police that day. She called the police after the incident involving Tammy. And just like you said with Eva, I'm sure this woman had a little bit of guilt.
Yeah.
About maybe not calling sooner.
If I would have called, maybe they would have found the car and maybe he wouldn't have taken Tammy.
Yeah. But I am really reticent to put too much blame.
Oh, for sure.
On some of these individuals. Because you could make the case. Okay, what happens if she calls that day? Are police out looking for this red car? Do they find him? Is he booked? Is he charged? And therefore not on the street to do what he did to Tammy? Sure, you could make that argument.
Yeah.
But we don't know her situation. We don't know how serious she thought it really was.
That's true.
So what we do know is that it didn't change, right? What happened to Tammy that night. I think you could go through a ton of different what if scenarios. And that's really tough to do after the fact. It's not really fair for a lot of people involved.
It's too easy to do that Monday morning quarterback.
Yes. Tammy Leakey was remembered in loving ways, and she's not been forgotten. At the service for Tammy, Carolyn Welch, one of many classmates from Verdun High who attended the service, said she was so friendly, so nice to people. Another classmate, Susan Latimer, agreed, saying she liked drawing, especially technical drawing, and everyone liked her. From the first time I met her in grade school, we were friends. She had an innocent face. For years after the death of Tammy Leakey, parents, friends, relatives, and loved ones would write messages in the Gazette for the remembrance of Tammy on the anniversaries of her death. Donna Leakey, Tammy's sister, wrote a poem in the newspaper in 1982, just a year after her sister's death. She wrote, "In memory of a dear sister who departed on March 12, 1981, Tammy was sweet. Now we are blue. We really loved her. Now we miss her too. Always remembered by Sister Donna." And, that type of stuff really tugs at your heartstrings.
Sure it does, yeah.
We said she was 8 years old. And she wrote this a year later. She was 9 years old writing this poem. It's heartbreaking. And I think you're right when you said most likely she idolized her big sister.
Yeah.
And so this was especially crushing for Donna, I'm sure. The following year in 1983, in the Gazette, Tammy's father wrote, "Tammy, there are no words that we can say how much we miss you since you've gone away, for a piece of our heart is kept aside. With so much love we could never hide, until we too will make the journey up above, where we will be with you once again, my love, sadly missed by Dad." So again, very touching.
It is. Kind of making me a little
teary-eyed.
Yeah.
I get it. I mean, a lot of these always do, because you have these family members who are left to kind of, pick up the pieces and grieve, and it's not a finite process. It just goes on and on and on. For as long as those family members live, they will grieve the loss of Tammy Leakey. Every anniversary, every big moment, right? There's going to be that, what if she was here?
Right.
What would we be doing? What would she be doing now?
Yeah.
What would she have gone on to do? And I always think about that when we do these unsolved cases. I just find it very hard to put myself in their position. Luckily, never having gone through it, I don't want to know, but I can only, commiserate and try to understand what it must be like for some of these family members.
But you're right. I mean, to think about today, what Tammy would be 54 years old. What would she have accomplished? What would she have in her life today?
Yeah. Kids, grandkids. We don't know. But there's no doubt that there was a lot of love shown for Tammy after her passing, and probably still is. I mean, we didn't get a lot of updates that were current.
Right.
That was the one thing about this story was, there was reporting back in the early 80s.
Yes.
But not really a lot.
Kind of slowed down
after that.
Yeah.
Because there's been no breaks in the case. Now you might see the anniversary of her murder being brought up, but there's really nothing new to add in those types of articles without some type of new information, a tip, a suspect. And that's the thing about this case. We don't even have a suspect to talk about.
We don't, and 40 some years later, could we get something? Could something eventually pop up? Maybe, but as time goes by, it's going to be difficult.
Well, and this one's difficult because, where's the crime scene? Where's the evidence?
Yeah.
I don't think this is one where, you're going to be reading about some type of DNA bombshell, genetic genealogy, and they tracked it down. And because I don't know what they have in the way of evidence, because I don't even know where the crime scene, was, other than where they found her body. And we don't know what, if any, evidence was collected. And, 1981 was pre-DNA.
Yeah.
So collection methods were spotty, to say the least, because they didn't know what certain things would one day yield. But, it's a tragic case.
It is.
And you would love for all of them to be solved. I do think, as we go through them, you can see where some have a greater chance of being solved based on what the police have, as far as evidence or this or that. And they may have some and just not have disclosed it.
That's true.
Because that wouldn't be out of the ordinary. But that's it for our episode on the murder of Tammy Leakey. We got some voicemails, Gibbs. You want to check those out?
Yes, hear them.
Hey, you guys. It's Jennifer from Santa Cruz in California. Love you both. Have been listening for many, many years. First time I've called, though. And the reason why I'm calling is I just got done listening to the Josh Gumond case, and something that you guys said at the beginning that I thought was really, really important. I know everybody has been following this Alec Murdaugh case, and I watched him testify, and the prosecutor was asking him about his conversation with Maggie before he left to supposedly go see his mother. And he couldn't remember anything that they talked about. And all I kept on thinking about was, if you found her dead an hour later, you would run through your conversation with her in your head 1,000,000 times. And the fact that he couldn't remember anything that they talked about was so telling to me. And you guys talked about that in this most recent unsolved case about how this young boy that went missing, his friends would think so intimately about their last conversation with him. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, and we're thinking about that. And love you both. Keep your own time ticking.
All right. Love you too. And that is something that I believe. Now, I don't have experience with it. When it comes to some type of murder or abduction or
Right.
tragedy like that, what I always related back to are things like 9/11 or, these big incidents where I can just distinctly remember things because of how big the moment was. And I feel as though if you later quickly knew that someone was missing, that last conversation you had with them would kind of get seared in. I believe that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Maybe not in every case and not with everyone, but I think more likely than not it would.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. This is Christian. I just found the podcast recently, and I've been binge listening to Unsolved. I still need to go over there to True Crime all the time and listen. But love the episode. My favorite episode so far was the Icebox murders because of all the conspiracies. And I've done research about the conspiracies with that Charles Rogers was could have possibly been at could have been a handler of the dude who could have possibly assassinated Dr. King and John F. Kennedy. But it was one case I was wondering, and I don't know, because I'm still binge watching. Did y'all guys listen? Did y'all guys do it? Was the Reuben Hurricane Carter case? It was a case out of Paterson, New Jersey, in the mid-60s. He's a boxer, and he spent a certain amount of time in prison, but it was speculated that he didn't do it, and there wasn't enough evidence and stuff like that. So stay safe, keep doing what you're doing, keep your own time ticking.
No, we have not done that case, but I did see the movie.
We did. Well, I did. We didn't see it together.
Was this a date that I don't remember?
You have that policy of not watching TV with each other. You know, if I come over early, you're like, TV's off. We're not watching something together because you're worried I'm going to spoil the ending.
You are a spoiler, but Denzel Washington played Hurricane Carter in the movie. So it could be a good episode.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. My name's Hannah. I'm from Geelong in Australia, and I listen to you all the time, but I listen to the South Pole poisoning episode, and I just wanted to say good try, but it's not Geelong, it's Geelong, and I love you guys. I'm Team Mike, but I love you both, and I can't wait for the episodes to come out, and I listen every week. Keep going, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Shocking that we would get an Australian city name wrong.
I try to tell you.
Now, to be honest, I didn't hear a lot of difference. I heard the emphasis was a little different.
Well, it's clear as day to me. You screwed up.
Thanks for pointing it out while we were doing the episode. You always come back after the fact and say, oh, yeah, I knew that. I just didn't want to tell you and help you out.
That's right.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
All month long on Pluto TV, stream the biggest Tyler Perry movies free. Watch your favorites like Medea's Witness Protection and Medea's Big Happy Family. Join Tyler Perry as he goes on a couples retreat with Sharon Leal in Why Did I Get Married? Or Idris Elba and Gabrielle Union in the Tyler Perry directed film Daddy's Little Girls. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies and TV shows. Available on live and on demand. Download the free Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming now. Pluto TV. Drop in, watch free.